know the topic of the presentation is how to go from design to application like a pro. But what does that mean? So the singular goal of this concept is to tap into one thought or one flow of thoughts that probably we all have. So we all dream to create something. We convert that dream into an aspiration, and then we start creating, right? So in this process, we move from less tangible to more tangible. For example, I dream of creating a beautiful app. And so that's my dream. My aspiration is to get inspired by an awesome design, which probably I can find on some of the cool websites out there like Dribbble and Behance and DeviantArt. There are plenty of such websites. So Dribbble is one of those websites that I personally use, and I found that to be very professional. So a lot of good designers post their designs there in anticipation of getting likes and comments from other designers. And generally, these designs are not copyrighted, so you are free to pick up those designs and implement on your own. And of course, credit the designer if you want to. So that is how I have created a few of my applications. So again, to repeat myself, so I dream of creating a beautiful app. I aspire that it be inspired by an awesome design, and I can do that using Flutter, right? So how can we take that forward? So let Flutter take you from dream to reality in just a few minutes. So that is the complete goal of this presentation, to show you how you can leverage the power of Flutter, the performance, the power of Dart, and the tool chain, the tools that power all these things. How can you leverage that to come up with a working application in just a few minutes? And the only thing that you need is a design to get inspired from. Even if you do not have a design to get inspired from, that's okay. After you have worked with a few designs for some time, it will come naturally to you, and you'll start thinking in terms of how you can take your ideas and put shape to it. So we want to go from here in our exercise. We want to do this exercise where we convert one design into an application. We are going to show. I'm going to show you how to do that. So this is a design that I picked from Dribbble. I just searched for mobile application designs, and this is one of the designs that came up a few months ago. So what I did was, this thought just came in my mind when I was traveling from my native place back to my working place in Gurgaon. So it was a train journey, and I thought of creating a step-by-step tutorial on how to go from design to application. I randomly searched for an application design on Dribbble, and I found this, and I thought, hell yeah, why not just give it a try and see how much time it takes to convert it into a working application. And to my surprise, I was able to do that in less than 1 hour. So which was really cool, because I was also new to Flutter at that time, and having not created a lot of Flutter apps, it was so cool to see the power of Flutter. So this is a simple application. It's although it looks very simple, it looks beautiful at the same time. So we can call this application a health application, or a health tracker, or a steps application, or whatever you want to call it. So this application has two screens. One screen is the home screen, where you have an overview of some health metrics, like the number of cups of water you had in a day, the number of steps you took, the number of calories you ate or burned during the day, the duration of exercises that you did, and your average beats per minute, your heart rate for that day. The second screen is something that comes up when you click on the cups icon on the home page. So the blue icon that you see, that is interactable. The goal is that all of those widgets on the first screen should be interactable, and but that's an activity that I'll pass on to you guys once you have learned how to create at least two screens and move from one screen to another. Right? So we want to go from that design to this application. So this is an actual video footage of an application running in iOS simulator. So this is how it will look like by the end of our exercise. We want to do it in 30 minutes, so I hope I stick to the timelines. I'll avoid any questions in the interim, and I'll take up questions only after 30 minutes to save time. So the goal of this exercise is not just to learn how to quickly just write some dirty code and get from point A to point B, but the goal is to learn some fundamentals of Flutter itself. So for example, how to create a new Flutter app, how to compose grid layouts. So those with a CSS background know what I mean, or if you have ever created a web application in Bootstrap, you know what I mean. How to install a package or a plugin in Flutter, and these packages or plugins are very similar to your plugins in say React Native or Ionic or even Node.js world. How to navigate from one screen to another. So we have two screens, right? So we have two screens. We want to move from one to another on the tap of some element on the first screen. How to add animation. So as you can see in this live footage, there's a small bit of animation that you see. Not just the transition animation, but if you notice the water droplet, it goes from small size to large size gradually. So this type of animation has a name. It's called a hero animation, and it's specially pronounced in the Flutter world. So finally, we'll see how to refactor like a pro. So Flutter is all about experimenting. So it's all about encouraging you to go ahead and write some code, not stop at some thought process on how to best create the how do I create the best architecture or the best looking screen. The idea is just create some code, and the Flutter toolchain gives you a lot of flexibility to refactor your code, and we'll see this along the process. So without wasting any time, I'll switch over to my code editor. Visual Studio is my personal preference, but feel free to use whatever Flutter supports. I think Flutter best supports two editors as of now. One is the officially supported thing, which is IDEA or Android Studio. And the second thing is Visual Studio Code. Now, in my experience with Flutter, so I started with Android Studio itself since it was recommended on the Flutter website, but I soon switched over to Visual Studio because of my personal preferences and also because I feel that a lot of the workflow is a lot easier in Visual Studio, but again, that could be my preference because I'm very used to the key mappings on Visual Studio and all that thing, right? So the very first step when you have your editor open is to create a new application, right? So in order to create a new Flutter application, of course, you'll need a few stuff already installed on your computer. The number one thing, of course, is the Flutter SDK, right? So I have the Flutter SDK, and the Flutter SDK itself requires a few more things for you to install. So the idea is that once you fetch the Flutter SDK zip file from the internet and put it somewhere on your computer and add the Flutter command in your path, Flutter provides you a tool called Flutter Doctor. So if you run Flutter Doctor, it will tell you all the dependencies that you need to install. So currently, it, for example, is checking what is or is not installed on my computer, and if something is missing, it will point it. So it starts by telling me what is the latest version of Flutter that is installed on my computer, whether I have the Android toolchain because that is required to create Android applications, whether I have Xcode support, which I do have. I'm just missing one dependency, which is CocoaPods. Not required, it's not mandatory, it's an optional thing, but it does complain about that. So it's good if you have this. It's just that it's a little size, hard disk guzzling thing, so it takes up a lot of hard disk space. So I just skip that. So it looks for all these other things that, for example, if you have Android Studio installed, if you have VS Code installed, of course, does not look for VS Code itself, but the VS Code plugins for Flutter and Dart. And if you have a connected device. So I do have a connected device. I have a simulator running over here. It's waiting for my application to come up on it. So with that, I'll move over to my code editor. The one last thing that I want to tell you is if you run Flutter Doctor and you feel that some things are missing, the good thing is Flutter Doctor itself will tell you the exact steps to install all those missing things. For example, if I were missing Android toolchain, it would tell me the exact steps to install Android SDK. And not just Android SDK, if, for example, Java GTK was also missing, it would tell me about that also. And the same goes for Xcode and everything like that. But of course, if you are developing on Windows, it will be a little different. So with that, I don't need this window anymore. So I'll just close it. Switching over to my code editor. So this is the normal setup that I go with. So on the left-hand side, I have my code editor. On the right-hand side, I have my application or the platform where I'll run my application. You could use your phone directly also. It could be an Android phone or it could be an iPhone, and you could mirror your phone over here, whatever you feel like. I think simulator works better when creating simple applications when you do not need, for example, hardware level stuff like the camera or the GPS coordinates or stuff like that. So let me create a new Flutter project. So to do that, I'll press Command Shift P. In Windows, it is Control Shift P. And I'll just search for Flutter and I see the Flutter new project option over here. I'll name my project. Let's call it Health App Flutter. So it's asking me where I should put it. I'll choose my sandbox folder for this. It will take some time, like 1 minute or so. So one thing I forgot to mention is that in order to have this functionality, the thing, these commands that I showed you, to create a new Flutter project, of course, you need to have the Flutter and Dart plugins installed on VS Code. So if you do not have them, just go to the extensions tab, search for Flutter, just in the search results, just click on install. It will automatically install the Dart plugin also for you. Right. So once you have done that, you don't even need to restart. You will automatically have access to this, the complete Flutter set. Okay, so it has created something with some boilerplate code. There's a lot of code. Probably there are more comments than code. Let me see how it runs in my actual device. So I'm going to go to the Run tab, click on Run and Debug, and let my Visual Studio figure out how to run it. So by default, it will pick up whatever device that is connected to your computer. In my case, it is a simulator. It could be a real device in your case. So it will automatically push this code onto your device, right? So for now, it is going to push it to my simulator. So the first build will take some time. It may take up to 1 to 2 minutes in your case, depending on your hardware configuration. But the subsequent builds will be much faster. And while developing, we'll also see the magic of hot reload. And we'll see how just modifying and saving our code will just automatically refresh it on my simulator device. Okay, let me get this screen out of the way. Something is popping up. It's great. This little notification that I got regarding DevTools, this is a cool feature in Flutter. So this provides you a DevTools to inspect any widgets on your screen. It's very similar to the DevTools that you're very used to using in, let's say, Chrome or other browsers. But in the interest of time, we're not going to cover that, but do explore this. Really handy when you want to debug your UI. Okay, so we have our sample Flutter application up and running. It's a complete application. No functionality is missing. So if I push the button on the bottom right corner, it's going to increment this counter that I see here. So very simple application, doesn't do anything else, right? But this is not what I want. I want to go to this design, right? So in order to go to this design, I need to add a lot of code. Now, let's say that before I, start adding some code, let me do some changes in this application. Let me first get rid of all this code in uh, below my main function, right? I'm not going to save my page right now because it is just going to blast. Let me do that. Let's see how the error screen looks like, right? So because there are build errors, it did not do anything. So let me just, so unimplemented handling of missing static target. So whenever you get some real complicated errors, they will be listed as so on the main, in your main app screen on this red background, and it will also be in the debug console, as you can see on the bottom with more details about this error. So this is very similar to how you see errors on React Native also. So if you're coming from that background, you're already used to it, right? So, but I don't want a material app here, right? So I want something more elaborate. So I'll start creating a new widget. So the very first thing to remember is that the entry point into any Flutter application is your main.dart file and the main function in it. So the main function void main is very similar to the main function or your entry points in C++ or Java like or C# like programming languages. So very similar to that. A little bit different from JavaScript, but you'll see a lot of the other code is very similar to JavaScript, right? So I'll start by creating my first widget. And when I say widget, I want to note that everything in Flutter, every UI that you see is a widget. So a lot of the functionalities are also widgets. And we'll see that in the course of our development, I hope, or in the course of your learning. So there are two types of widgets that you can create in Flutter. So one is a stateless widget, as Rakesh pointed out, and the other is a stateful widget. So a stateless widget is a very static widget that does not maintain any state. And a stateful widget is something that can maintain a state. For example, the increment counter thing that we just saw, it had a state, which was the value of that counter. So it was a state. Another state could be like your currently logged in user could be a state. The currently open tab could be a state, right? So you can manage all that state using a stateful widget. But since we are not going to manage any state in our application, I'm just going to create a stateless widget and take it from there. So in order to create a stateless widget, I can start typing it as a class. And let's say I can call it my app. And I can extend it from stateless widget and start writing my class. But hell, there's a better way to do it. So if I just type in STL, um, Flutter gives me these two options to create either a stateless widget or a stateful widget. Stateless is what I want. I'll just press it and voila, I have my boilerplate code. So I'll call it my app. I do not have a better name. And what it has is this widget, this build method, right? This build method that returns a widget. Container is the most basic widget in Flutter. It is very synonymous to the div element that you have in HTML. So if you know what a div is, you pretty much know what a container is, right? So let's say that I do not want a container. I want, let's say, a text widget. And as you might have guessed, a text widget just displays some text. I want to say hello world. This language is very semicolon conscious, so you need to, sublime semicolons here, unlike JavaScript where it is optional. So now that my basic application is ready, what I can do is I can pass the name of my main application into run app, and this is how I can create my application, right? So it complains that there are some notions that okay, it did not find an ancestor which provides blah blah blah. So this is because this application cannot be directly, um, cannot directly have a stateless widget that does not so extend from, let's say, a material widget or a Cupertino widget. So that is the only one thing that I need to do here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of returning text directly, I'm going to return a material app. And inside the material app, I can, have several options like what is my home widget going to look like. So in this case, I can put in some text here, and now my application is pretty much ready. It looks very ugly, but you can see hello world written there. Now let's say that I want this hello world thing to be in the center. So one way to do that is to add a style, right? Add a style here of type text style. And or is there an alignment property directly? Yeah, there's a text align property directly available to me. So I can check the type of this thing. I can put a center here, and it comes to center. But how do I make it come to the absolute center of the screen? So I have a widget for that. So let me remove this code and show you how I can do that. So I'll select this text widget, click on this little bulb icon here, and this is where the power of refactoring comes in, and says wrap with center. So it will automatically wrap my widget with a center widget. Every widget, pretty much all the widgets in Flutter will have a child property. So it helps you create a hierarchy of widgets where you start from your root. In my case, the root is my app. My app has a material app. Material app has a center widget, and center widget has a text widget. So this is a hierarchy that can be found there. Right? So if I do this now, it is totally in the center of the screen. Right? But again, this is not exactly what I want. So let me start writing some meaningful code and start realizing this design. So how do I do that? So for example, the very first thing that I would need to do is make the background white, not black. Put the search icon there, put the for today heading over there, and start adding some widgets. So since we are time bound, what I've done is I've done a trick. I've done some cheating. I've already created this application, and this is my GitHub repository for it. And as you can see, this application is, I have these steps laid out, how to follow this repository and follow all the steps where you can create this application from scratch on your own. So the way I generally teach any topic is through Git commits, which I believe is a great way to learn. So if you can see all these steps that we are going to, many steps that we're going to take toward creating this fully functional application, from going to design to application. I've divided that in 19 steps, and all those 19 steps are written in commits. So all these commits correspond to one step that I want to take in order to create my application, right? So for example, the very first step is to create the home screen, or to create the home screen with a title. So for this, what I'll do is I'll copy the code from here and paste it there and explain some bits in between, whatever are important to explain, right? Okay, so without wasting any time, what I'll do is I'll come back here and I'll go back to my file explorer. All your custom code will go to the lib folder. You can see the main.dart file is already in there. Now you can create a new file directly inside lib and create it for your home screen. But I prefer to create all my screens inside the screens folder. So I'll create this new folder. Inside this folder, I'll create home underscore screen dot dart. So this underscore based approach is the recommended convention in Dart for creating the name of your files. While when you actually create your classes, you can follow the Pascal case or the capital camel case thing that you use in C# or Java. So the very first thing that I'll do is, and I'll do it in all the widgets that I create, I'll import the material library. So this material library will give me a lot of inbuilt widgets that I can then use. Now, like I did in the main.dart file, I'll create a stateless widget and call it home screen. By default, it adds a container for me, but I don't want a container. What I want is a scaffold. So I'll copy this code from here, paste it right over here, and hope that there are no errors. I don't see any errors, so I'll just click on save. Let's go back to our application. So it did not reflect any changes here because I have to reference my home screen inside of my main.app, right? So the way to do it is, so this material app, which is the root of my application, it expects a home widget. So this is where I'll remove center and I'll put home screen. Now, if you notice, I haven't imported home screen yet, but if I select this IntelliSense option, it will automatically import it for me. So I don't need to do anything. So I'll hit save, and I already have something created for me, right? So what is this thing? So what I've done is I've created a scaffold, and a scaffold is basically the normal structure of your application, the most popular structure that you can use for your application, where your application is divided into three parts, right? So one is your app bar that you see on the top. So I can put an app bar like so, and it will show me this app bar. But I don't want this app bar for my screen, but so I'll eventually remove it. And you can put a bottom navigation bar also if you, for example, are planning to have some tabs in there. So you get the tab bar widget that where you can put in the tabs, and it will show the tabs at the bottom. So you can divide your screen into three parts. One is the top part, one is the body, and one is the bottom part. In our design, since there is no app bar, I'll remove the app bar. I'll just go with body. I begin with a safe area, and the safe area is a place where that takes. So this is a widget that takes care of your text, whatever is inside your widget, it not being pushed over to the very top of the screen, right? So in these new phones, especially iPhones, you have this this cutting design over here, right? So because of this, a lot of the Android phones do not have it, and because of this, what you if I do not use a safe area, what it does, what it will do is, let's say I remove this widget, it will automatically bring it up one level up. Remove this widget again. So as you can see that it is pushed over the area where it gets cut. So to escape this, I can just put it inside a safe area, right? So like so. So inside it, I have some, I have to put some padding. Again, padding, unlike CSS. So in CSS, you are used to, writing a separate CSS file for styles. In Dart, in Flutter, what you do is you create a widget for your styling also. A lot of the styling is possible inside some properties of a widget itself also, but a lot of the common properties, CSS-like properties, are actually widgets in here. So there's a padding widget, there's a center widget that you already saw. So I put some padding from the, in the horizontal direction. I can also put in the vertical direction, but since I'm using a safe area, I do not need that, right? I put some, alignment over here, and this is where things get very interesting. I'm using a column widget. So this is how you start creating grids, right? So a grid is something that is divided into two parts. One is the row, one is the column. So you can have several columns and several rows, exactly like how it is in Excel sheets. If you're coming from a Bootstrap or a CSS grid layout background, you already know what I mean. So in Flutter, you have a column widget, which takes a children property. Inside children, it takes an array of widgets. So I have just two widgets in here. One is a text widget, and another is also a text widget. So one is for the heading, and one is for the date. So since we are way beyond September 22nd, let me put today's date here. It's 2020. and it is reflected directly, right? Great. So my home screen is pretty much ready, at least the initial part. So what is the next step? So the next step is to go back and see what else I can do. So the number one thing that I can do is I am hard coding my date over here, but what I need is I want to show a date, a computer generated date, automatically generated. So what I can do is I can create a new date object here and use its to ISO string property. Sorry, so I'll need to put a datetime.now first. Okay, so today's date represented in ISO format. This is how it looks like. But by default, it looks very ugly. And I can go ahead and fiddle with the properties of my datetime and manually take out the year and the day and the month from here. But there's a better way to do it. So I can install a package that will do the formatting for me. So there, by default, there is no formatter in Dart that it gives you. So what I can do is I can install this package called INTL, which is small for internationalization, and it takes care of a lot of other formattings as well. So I'll head over to so Flutter. If you just search for Flutter packages, you'll arrive at this website called pub.dev. So in pub.dev, you can select Flutter here and search for INTL package. This is the first package that you get. So you have all the packages rated by their health as well as their contribution. So if it has a rating of 98, it means it's a pretty good and active plugin, safe to use. Inside it, there's an installing tab. I just copy the line from here, right? And go back to my editor and open my pubspec.yaml file. So this is my configuration file where I make all the changes to my metadata. So this is very similar to package.json if you know, if you're coming from JavaScript background, right? So in the dependencies section, below Cupertino icons, I'll just paste that line. I'll hit save. It will automatically start fetching the package for me. It will download it and install it under packages, right? So there's a hidden folder where the package is actually installed. So now my INTL package is ready to be used. Now, one thing that I've seen is that some packages require you to restart your application. So this hot reload option will just restart your application on a UI level. I need a cold restart. So I'll just stop my simulator and I'll start it again. So F5, if you press F5, it will start it for you. So while it is initializing my application again, so this is something that I've already done. Yeah, great. So I've followed all the steps. So the next thing is to use the INTL package to format my data. So as you can see in the home screen, I need to make these small changes. So I'll pick up this code from here. Still building, should be up in 1 minute. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll put this code here, right? So the date format class is coming from INTL package. Since I have not imported the package, it is showing as such. I can press this bulb icon and import the suggested package. So that error is gone now. I want this formatted as, in this format. You can go to this INTL's website and check what formats are supported. I can pass in the date that I want formatted, which is today's date. So if I click on save, you can see that automatically it has picked the today's date, right? Which is exactly in the same format as we saw earlier, but this is actually now coming from my computer. It's been generated from it. Great. So we are past the first few steps, and by now I hope that you are getting familiar with the syntax and how we deal with Flutter, hot reload, and stuff like that. and installing packages as well. Okay, so we are done with this commit. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to install a custom font. Or rather, this is what I would generally do, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip it. I'm just going to skip with the font that I already have, which looks pretty fine. But this is something that you can do in order to make your application more jazzy. You can download fonts from, let's say, fonts.google.com, which is a free resource for your fonts. So I found this font from over there, and put them inside your assets folder. So this is your asset folder right over here. There is no asset folder here, so I'll need to create one. So I can just create a new folder and call it assets. So inside your assets folder, you can put your font files or your static images or your videos or whatever, and reference them in your pubspec.yaml. So the same file that we used for installing packages, right? So once you're done with it, you can then start using this font file. Okay, but I'm going to skip this for now. So now what I want to do is I want to create the first row tiles. Now the first row tiles, what do they look like? We'll go back. So these two tiles I want to add to my code. So I already have the heading and the subheading. So I now want to add these two tiles. So what I can do is I can come to this commit, and I can copy the code from here. So what I want to add, you just saw that there is a column that I'm using on my home screen. I just need to add some more um, stuff, some more elements or widgets to my column. So I'll just pick them from here. Okay, so I'll just collapse this. So this is one widget in my column. This is the second widget in my column. What I'll do is I can just copy paste it here. I hope there are no errors. But since there is an error. Okay, let me just copy paste the entire file from this commit. Now there are no errors, which is good. I don't need this extra safe area, so I can just remove it and see how easy it is to remove. So now in my screen, I can see that these two widgets are added for me. Great. So I'll just collapse the first two ones, which are the heading and the subtitle one. So the size box is for spacing. I can, add some height and put some vertical spacing, or I can add some horizontal spacing as well. So in this column we have 1, 2, and 3 widgets. So this third widget is the spacing, and the fourth widget is the actual row. So this row has um, two widgets. So one is my container, and the second is also a container which contains a column and stuff like that. So if you already know what columns and rows mean, you pretty much have the idea. So this is composed again of a column which has 1, 2, 3 widgets. One is this droplet, one is this one is this cups text, and the same for this thing, right? So I have these things in place. So what I can do is I can now go back and see the rest of the comments. Now I have my first row tiles. Now what I want to do is I can clearly see from here that these two tiles pretty much look the same. So the only difference is that this is blue in color, this has a white background, and this has an icon. This does not have an icon. But rest all the structure is same. So why not reuse one tile and copy them over, right? So what I can do is in Flutter, you just concentrate on creating whatever duplicate code that you want and then refactor it later. So in my case, what I can do is I can see that this widget, this container thing is the actual tile, right? So what I can do is I can click this bulb icon and say extract widget from here, right? So once I extract it, let's say I want to call it a tile. So this will generate, so it will remove that code from here. All that code is removed from here now and has been put at the bottom of my file. So now this new tile is a stateless widget and it has its own build method. Inside it, there's a container that we just saw. So the entire code is here, right? So this is how awesome Flutter is. I can just remove this extra boilerplate code over here, right? So this is the second tile, right? So I can just remove the complete tile from here, and I can just put a tile widget here, right, as well, and you can see that it's duplicated. So this is the reusability part. But what good is this reusability if it is exactly the same? So we need to customize style in order to accept some parameters, right? So parameters like what's the heading, what's the subheading, and so on, and what's the background color going to be, and all that. So for that, I'm going to I'm going to tap into my this file, this commit, from where I'm going to copy the entire file for my tile. Now, since this tile is not a screen, I can, inside my lib folder, I can create a new folder and call it widgets. So I, generally put all my reusable widgets inside the widget directory. This is just how I do it, but you can do whatever you want to do. So I can create a tile.dart file and put all my content here, right? So everything works pretty much without an error. So this is the place where I'm accepting some parameters. So this is the constructor, background color, border color, text color, icon, title, and subtitle. So as we can see, we have put all these things here. Rest of the code is pretty much boilerplate that we saw just now. So I don't need this now, right? So what I can do is now I can, so this is not imported yet. I can import it first. Now I need to supply some parameters to it. And for that, I'll again refer my commit, right? So first of all, I'll pick up the content from here. So put it here. Okay. Now it will create a tile. Since my rest of the, so I've done a lot of changes, so I'll probably need to reload it. But let me just continue doing whatever I was, going to do. So let me just copy paste the other tile also. And I'll put it here. Okay, so now we are back to our original display. So now we have reused the tile class or the tile widget, and we have provided it some custom parameters, and these are reflecting here. How awesome is it, right? So this file is sitting in my widgets, and all I needed to do was I needed to add some customizations using some class fields and reflect them inside the build method, right? So now I think we are at a very good platform where we can cover rest of the commits without a lot of um, discussions. Not that I was doing a lot of discussions previously also. So now what I now need to do is I need to add one more element to my column. So again, this column list that I'm using here, this refers to my main page layout. What I need to do is I need to find my main column. So I just collapse this also and put my new widget here. I think there's a missing comma there. I'll put a comma here, right? Okay, and it is asking me for, let me just, copy the entire file at this point. Saves a lot of time in fixing these comma or parenthesis issues, right? So this style thing, I can import it again. Right? So now my code is without errors, right? And I have the third row as well, right? Great going. So I can just continue and I can just pick up the next commit. Now, what I can do is I can, since there are a lot of repeating values inside my home screen, right? For example, the color white or the border color, which is some shade of gray, right? So this shade of gray is being repeated here. So what I can do is I can extract these repeating colors or whatever constants in a separate constants file, right? So let me create a separate constants file, and I do that directly inside my lib. So I call it constants.dart, and I'll paste all those constants here. The colors, we'll begin with the colors. So my first, let's say, color is k tile default background color, which is white. Default text color is this, and border color is this. And we'll see later how we can add more colors, like the blue color and all. We can define them here and reuse them all over the place. In Dart, the convention is to begin the names of all constants with k. In other languages, the convention is to write them all in all caps and separate the words by using an underscore. But here you just do this. So, but you're not bound to it, but it's a convention. So in default Flutter and Dart libraries, you will see a lot of constants starting with a k. So let me come back here and replace my repeating values with these ones that are now going to come from my constants class or constants file, right? So let me import constants. I'll do the same for the next widget also. These are the top two widgets. Okay, I think I am ready, right? I'll just refresh it. Something is going right. Okay, the color blue is missing, right? So where is the color blue? I think at this point, we are missing the blue color. So I'll probably go back to my commits. Or not. Again, what the hell? Let me just copy the entire file from here. And paste it right here. Right, so I can import my tile concept like so. I think it should now look better. Okay, so no worries, there is no color in here. We'll put that color later on. Right. So now I can go to the next commit. And I can keep on adding more things to my home screen.